Hey, Sunday was a dominating performance and it was fun to watch. The Dolphins are 9-3. It's their best start since 2001. So you got to join the party. Subscribe to the channel. We're talking Dolphins football every single day. And we got a lot to get to on this edition of Dolphins Today. All right, if you were living under a rock on Sunday, then you missed one of the more dominating performances of the entire year. 45-15, and frankly, might not have even been that close. Complete and total domination from the Miami Dolphins in Week 13, culminating with that huge win on the road, no less, against the Washington Commanders. And I know the Washington Commanders, they're certainly in a spiral downward, but it was so refreshing to see the Dolphins back and better than ever on both sides of the ball. Really a complete effort from the offense and from the defense. The numbers in front of you there. One of Tua's better games for a lot of different reasons, but most importantly for me, took care of the ball. 0 interceptions. He had the 2 touchdown passes to Tyreek Hill, and stop me if you heard this one before, but Tyreek Hill eclipsed the century mark 8th time in 12 games. That's insane. What a game for Tyreek Hill. The 5 catches, yes, but he made the most of them with 2 of them going for 6. A 78-yard touchdown catch and, of course, a 60-yard touchdown catch. He was good. And Raheem Mostert and De'Von Achane were both really good out of the backfield. 3 touchdowns on the ground combined between those 2. So what does it all mean? Well, we're going to break it down on today's show like we do on every Monday, right? It's Overreaction Monday, so ton to get to there. And unfortunately, there were some injuries from the game on Sunday against Washington. We'll talk about the Jerome Baker injury news and the latest for the Dolphins linebacker and what the plan will be moving forward. So buckle up. Let's get right into it with our overreaction, starting with the first one, that this offense is back. And I don't even know if this is an overreaction, because what I saw yesterday in Landover, Maryland, reminded me of the early offensive prowess that this team showed in weeks 1 through 3 of the National Football League. And early in the season, you saw them clicking on all cylinders, and that is exactly what we saw in Week 13 against the Washington Commanders. And I think it was a statement made by this Dolphins team to put the rest of the NFL on notice that now the team is playing some complementary, complete football, starting with the offense. Tua's thrown a touchdown pass in 21 straight games, and yes, that's the longest active streak in the NFL. Really impressive there. You got to give the offensive line their flowers, because once again, they protected Tua, kept him upright. He had plenty of time to throw, and you know Tua gets the ball out of there quickly anyways. And now, through 13 weeks of play, the offensive line has allowed the 3rd fewest sacks. So really impressive there. And as I mentioned, it was a clean game. They won the turnover battle. If you're watching at home, just start clapping. Give the Dolphins a standing ovation, because it had been 8 weeks since they had officially won the turnover battle. So all of that results in a 45-15 win. Has me feeling good. I'm sure you're feeling good about that Dolphins offense when you see the 45 points up on the board. One of those was a defensive touchdown by AVG, which we'll get into in a little bit here. But based on what you saw, I got to ask you, what's your confidence level in this offense? Can we officially declare them back? Let me know how confident you are in the Dolphins offense moving forward. Scale it for me 1 through 10. Now, if you're like me and you love Dolphins dubs, you got to subscribe to the channel, because it's a Victory Monday. We're celebrating every Dolphins win on Sunday with Victory Mondays. We got to do a Victory Saturday the other day. That was kind of wild after they won on Black Friday. But hey, hit that sub button, because we're talking Dolphins football every single day with daily Dolphins content and, of course, our live watch party. You can do so at youtube.com/DolphinsNews. Now, I've got a couple more overreactions to get into as the show goes along, and then, like I mentioned, we'll talk about that Jerome Baker injury. But first, I got to give a huge shout-out to today's presenting sponsor, and that is Prize Picks. I've been telling you about Prize Picks all season long, and it's even more important now because I know you lost in your fantasy football playoff game, and so you're done with fantasy football. I just know it is. That's why it's time for daily fantasy football, and it's the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. right there at prizepicks.com/CLNS. They're the largest independently owned platform for daily fantasy sports, so you know it's the best. And every Monday night, I like to do a little prize pick selection. Here's what I'm rolling with tonight. And let me back up a step further. The way prize picks works, you pick more or less on a player's projected stat, and that's when the fun begins. So Cincinnati's quarterback, it's not Joe Burrow, it's Jake Browning. And for that, I'm picking less than his projected passing total of 218.5. And listen, I mentioned daily fantasy sports. Yeah, Travis Etienne's a fun guy to play with because you can always pick the more with him. He hasn't been having the best season, which means he is due for a breakout game. How about Travis Etienne on the more rushing yards of 67.5? Now you get to sit back and enjoy the ride. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. That's where you got to go. We've got a $100 deposit match waiting for you. And as always, we love you and we care about you. So we put that link right in the description of today's video so it's easy enough to access. But one more time, prizepicks.com/CLNS, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And I forgot to mention, you can do a power play or a flex play. Power play, you got to get every single one right. Flex play, you got to get 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4. And that, again, is another way. Prize Picks is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. I want to get this started because I think it's time. 13 weeks of NFL action in the books, and we can declaratively say that Tyreek Hill is the best wide receiver and has a case for MVP because what the Cheetah is doing is simply insane. Eye-popping numbers, video game-like numbers. He's a human cheat code, 88 receptions, over 1,300 yards, the 10 touchdowns, and mind you, folks, 8 out of 12 games he's gone over the century mark, which is just insane. Let me put it into perspective for you, too. I think this tweet from the NFL on CBS does a great job of that. So Tyreek Hill, 1,481 yards receiving. Insane. Really impressive, right? Every Cardinals wide receiver total combined has 1,412 yards. Tyreek Hill has more than every single Giants wide receiver combined, more than every single Patriots wide receiver, and the same with the Jets and the Falcons. So let's count them up. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams. Tyreek Hill has more receiving yards than their entire wide receiver depth chart combined, more than 5 teams. That is insane. So I'm on the Tyreek Hill for MVP campaign. I want to know if you are as well. Let me know in the comments. Does Tyreek Hill win this year's NFL MVP? It's real simple. Type Y for yes or N for no. And as I started thinking about this, I thought, okay, let me actually see what the odds makers in the books are saying. You got the top 3 there with Dak, Brock, and Jalen Hurts. And based on the way the 49ers played yesterday against the Eagles, I might bump Brock Purdy up there a little bit more than Jalen Hurts. But you get the idea. It is a quarterback award, Patrick Mahomes, and our very own Tua Tagovailoa. The top 5 for MVP odds are all quarterbacks. Then throw in Lamar Jackson. Finally, we get to Tyreek Hill at plus 1,600. It's even more than that, depending on what odds maker you're looking at, followed by C.J. Stroud, Trevor Lawrence, and Josh Allen. So again, it is an all-quarterback award aside from Tyreek Hill. So if he's able to track down that MVP award, it would be certainly an impressive accomplishment. Speaking of impressive, look at this one. Tyreek Hill needs just 519 yards to make his goal of 2,000 yards receiving. That's just 5 more games to go and 519. So he needs to average a little bit more than 100 yards per game the rest of the way to get that 2,000-yard mark that when he declared that before the season even began, some people said he's crazy, but he is more than well on his way to backing that up. So looking forward to seeing Tyreek Hill continue to cook. He's been the best wide receiver in the NFL, and it hasn't been close. And for that reason, I think he's got a legitimate case to be the NFL MVP when it's all said and done. Now, continuing on, we got to give some love to the defense because they've been trending. I tell you what, we talk about it each and every week. They've been playing some of their best football, and again, it was on full display, and albeit against a lackluster opponent in the Commanders. But that passing game is no joke for the Washington Commanders. Sam Howell entered that game leading the NFL in passing yards, and they shut him down. Take a look at this from Joe Shad. The Dolphins defense is number 6 in the NFL in fewest yards per game allowed and number 7 in the NFL in fewest yards per play. So top 10 defense in both of those categories. They're also number 7 in rushing yards per play allowed and number 7 in passing yards per play allowed, which again speaks to the cohesiveness of this unit, the way they continue to get better game in and game out under Vic Fangio has been a lot of fun to watch, and they've been doing it while overcoming some injuries. So part of that is a part of course, life in the National Football League. We've talked about it at length. But last Friday, losing Jalen Phillips for the rest of the season with the blown Achilles was certainly a huge shot and a huge blow to the morale of this defense. But you got to give Andrew Van Ginkel a ton, and I mean it, folks, a ton of credit for the way he stepped up and the way he filled that role and really filled the void left by an influential player like Jalen Phillips. And Andrew Van Ginkel did it, and he did it with a bang. I mean, we're talking the first half, he had a sack, he had the interception, and yes, he took that interception all the way back for a touchdown. That's a huge shout-out to Andrew Van Ginkel and the way he took the torch from the injured Jalen Phillips and continued to make impactful plays at that edge rusher position and showed he is certainly capable of being an impactful player on the defensive side. So Andrew Van Ginkel, if we're giving out defensive game balls and that sort of thing, he would certainly have mine for his effort yesterday against the Washington Commanders. And I think it really was a boost in morale to the entire defense when they saw Andrew Van Ginkel get a sack early and when they saw him get that pick six in the first half. That just helped the chemistry, the spirit of this defense. You could just tell the Dolphins were playing inspired football on Sunday on both sides of the ball, both offense and defense. Now, let's get really crazy as we wrap up our Overreaction Monday segment. I've seen it online, and I'm starting to think it a little bit too, based on the way the rest of the AFC is unfolding. You saw the Chiefs lose on Sunday Night Football in week number 13, and we'll see Jacksonville on Monday Night Football tonight. But as we look at the top tier of the AFC, you start to make the case when the Dolphins play the way they did against the Commanders, they might be unbeatable and the team to beat in the AFC. I love this because it talks about and puts into perspective how big of an upset that was. Brett Brusheisen, the director of communication for the Dolphins, said it's the greatest margin of victory for any road team of the Miami Dolphins or any road game played in December or later in team history. And I know that has a couple of factors there, but you get the idea. They walloped the Commanders. It's the fourth largest margin of win, regardless of location, for Miami since 2000. Now, as it relates to Miami being unbeatable and what that playoff picture will look like, we're going to dive into this as the week goes on, but a 99% chance to make the playoffs. Really good. What we're chasing, that bye week in round number 1. Remember, only one team gets the bye week, and right now, based on over 250,000 simulations, the Dolphins have a 27% chance to earn that number 1 seed and earn that bye week. But combined, either a bye week and hosting in that wild card round of having a home game, yes, we're looking at a 97% chance, which is awesome. And overall, a 99% chance to make the playoffs. So you look at the way the Dolphins have taken care of business in 12 weeks of play, you got to feel really good about the Dolphins and the Aqua and Orange moving forward. I want to wrap it up with some injury news and the latest on Jerome Baker. Of course, Jerome Baker, the influential player in the middle of that Dolphins defense, has played so well all season and helped lead that Dolphins defense, left the game against the Washington Commanders after suffering that knee injury and did not return. And he's played really well this season, as I mentioned, the 2 interceptions in 12 games, 2 sacks, but he's also just been a stable force in the middle for Vic Fangio's defense, 65 tackles on the season. And when Mike McDaniel spoke after the game yesterday, didn't have a lot to say on the Baker injury situation, but did comment that it's really early and the vibe he has is not season-ending. So, good news in the sense if you think it's not season-ending. And remember, we've talked about it before, but in case you missed some of those videos, the Dolphins have already used 6 of their 8 eligible returnee activations from injured reserve. So if Baker were to go on injured reserve, there's a chance he might not be under the qualifying activation of being able to come back off injured reserve. So let's hope he doesn't need to go on injured reserve and that the Dolphins will see him back in the lineup in the near future. And like Mike McDaniel said, that it's not season ending. So we know he's important to the team, and we want to show him some love, so do so now. Type JB in the comments to wish Jerome Baker all the best. And speaking of replacements for Jerome Baker, Duke Riley was the one that came in relief against the Washington Commanders, and I think he played pretty well. Now, Duke Riley is very active in special teams, and so we don't often see him on the defensive side for the Dolphins, but he's a guy that went in and actually played pretty well when you think about what he was dealing with in terms of coming in for an injured player against the Washington team and continuing to play great defense as part of his 111th for the Dolphins on Sunday against the Commanders. So, like I said, he plays a significant role in special teams, and he's played 115 snaps so far this season, so it's not like he's completely brand new to being out there, but he'll certainly have more of an impactful role with Baker out, and I'm excited to see how he's able to utilize the opportunities, just like we saw with Andrew Van Ginkel filling in for an injured Jalen Phillips. So, hope you enjoyed today's show. It's always a pleasure bringing you Dolphins content day in and day out on Dolphins Today, the largest Dolphins YouTube community. So make sure you join if you haven't yet. Now is the time, baby. 9-3, best start since 2001. The Dolphins are rolling. 99% chance to make the playoffs and a really good chance that they're going to be playing some home playoff games at Hard Rock Stadium, which we know they've been really good at home this year and dating back to last year. They've won 15 of their last 17 at Hard Rock Stadium. So subscribe to the channel. Join us all week as we get set for Week 14 in the National Football League. And the Dolphins will be on prime time. How about that? A Monday night football matchup against the Tennessee Titans. We'll have a preview on that. And as always, we'll have a live show on Wednesday. All getting set for that live watch party. Titans versus Dolphins in Week 14 of the National Football League. Shout out to producer Jack on the ones and twos. Appreciate all he does for the program. And hey, we'll see you next time on Dolphins Today.